Hey YouTube, Alex Conley here today with another video. Today's video, I want to talk about some of the advantages of traveling as a young adult. Now, there's a variety of advantages, in my opinion, to making the time and putting away the money to travel as a young adult that may not be the same as, that may not make it the same as traveling when you are older. So the first advantage I can think of off the top of my head would be peak energy. So typically when you're a young person, you're gonna have the most energy, the most physical energy. You're more likely to be in good physical condition than you will be when you're older. Alongside that, you're probably less likely to have serious pressing health issues. You're probably less likely to have heart disease, cancer, and other serious illnesses that will put an end to your travel plans or put a serious hamper on them. So right off the bat, you're probably, if you're thinking, oh, I want to do this hike, or I want to do this, I want to check out this, I want to swim at this beach, or I want to explore this park. A lot of these things are going to be easier when you're younger because you're going to have more energy to do them. And you're probably not going to have as many concerns about various ailments and health concerns. Next, it's going to be easier for you to learn new languages. So typically, as we age, our brains and our ability to learn gets a little bit more solidified. We move from having weaker short-term memory to having more long-term memory. We're remembering things for a longer amount of time, but it's harder for us to learn new things. So typically, you'll find that as you age, it's going to be harder for you to learn new languages. So if you are looking to travel to a new place, trying to pick up some of that local language, some of the local dialect, younger people are probably going to have an easier time just based on brain. From my understanding, I think the term is brain plasticity. So keep in mind, if you're trying to integrate into a new culture or society, there's going to be some ways in which your adaptation to the local language or dialect is going to be easier when you're young. So next, you're probably going to be more willing to tolerate cheaper accommodation. So I've found that when I talk to older travelers, even middle-aged travelers, they have higher qualifications and higher demands, higher standards for their accommodation. They don't want to do a hostel. They don't want to do a small room or perhaps a room, an apartment share on Airbnb. They're looking to have privacy. They're looking to have comfortable furniture. They're looking to be well rested. So typically when you're younger, you're more willing to put up with some of these things. And you may be spending, as a younger person, you may be spending less time resting on vacation. You may be spending more time out and about doing activities, walking around town, different excursions. So you may be more willing to put up with cheaper accommodation. So as you get older, you may find that you require a bigger budget to travel in the way that you want, and that you're not willing to travel for less. So as a young person, keep in mind that you're probably going to be a little bit more tolerant of accommodations that aren't the best. I can speak for myself, as a younger person that's traveling. I am willing to tolerate somewhat imperfect accommodations. You'll notice some of the rooms I've stayed in are relatively small, but that's okay for me right now. I'm only 27, so I've still got decades more traveling I want to do, and I plan on later on in life, when I'm a bit more financially successful, that I will probably have better accommodations. I'll probably eat nicer meals. I'll probably opt for more convenient means of transportation, have these types of luxuries. But right now, I'm exploring. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just needs to be safe and out of the elements, and near transportation and food. These basically the necessities. I'm not looking for as many luxuries. I find that younger people are probably going to have an easier time making new friends. They're probably going to be more open to change, or a little bit more open-minded, a little bit less set in their ways, and so they may have an easier time meeting new people and being a bit more spontaneous. I found that the older people I know like a somewhat predictable way of having their day-to-day life. They're not as they're not as enthused about surprises or changes to their schedule. So keep in mind that as a younger person, you may find that being able to change plans on the fly to account for new friends, new relationships, doing things that you weren't familiar with before, maybe canceling later plans to continue doing the same thing that you're doing. These types of things, making new friends along the way seems to be easier for younger people. It's not to say older people can't make friends, but typically I found that older people have an easier time befriending people that have more in common with them. And you could say the same for young people, but I find that when I was younger, I had an easier time, younger than I am now, I had an easier time befriending people that had different backgrounds than me. And as I get older, I'm more inclined to make friends with people that I feel like are similar to me. Maybe that I have better discernment as an adult, but anyway. I do think that most people would agree that younger people tend to have an easier time making friends. Does it mean that they're always the best friends? Well, that's to be determined on the individual, but worth pointing out. So you can handle less sleep probably better than an older person can. When you're a young person traveling and let's say you decide to party all night and you stay awake until 3, 4 a.m. and you wake up at 8, 9, 10 a.m., you may be able to go after some coffee. You may be able to kind of borrow from yourself a bit. But an older person that's, say, 50, 60, 70, they're going to have less ability to recover from a lack of sleep. So they're not going to be able to tolerate not sleeping as much. Now, some older people I know do, but in my opinion, there's a much greater risk of health when you're not getting a substantial amount of sleep. You're having a lot more risks when you get older. Things like heart disease, are definitely exacerbated. Once again, I'm not a medical doctor, but based on friends and family members that have issues with insomnia and comparable situations, they tend to react a lot less. They tend to be able to bounce back a lot less than a young person can when it comes to a lack of sleep. They tend to not be able to burn the midnight oil day after day like some young people can. I mean, there are some weeks where in 7 days I get 40 hours of sleep, which may sound like a lot to some of you, but I prefer 8 hours a night. That's even now, even though I'm not even middle-aged, even now I prefer not to go more than 2 or 3 days without 8 hours of sleep each night. I find that it catches up to me and I end up having to take a whole day to just catch up on sleep, and it's just not the most productive way to schedule my days. So yeah, younger people may have an easier time getting away with less sleep, older people not so much. So kind of the next point, accommodation, food, and transit will probably be as cheap as they're going to be in your lifetime. Now, we do have economic ups and downs. There are times when the world gets cheaper and the times when the world gets more expensive, but linearly speaking, over several decades, the world's gonna get more expensive. A lot of these destinations that you're interested in, different places you're gonna go to, that you're gonna wanna go to, most of them are getting more expensive over time. And certainly in a decade or two, most of these places are going to get more expensive. Now, I'm not just talking about places like Disney World that are tourist destinations, but I'm talking about even things like accommodation, just hotels. Hotels are going to get more expensive. Food prices are probably going to go up. Food is probably not going to get cheaper. If there's a certain, you want to go to Maine and have the Maine lobster's probably not going to get cheaper over time. If you're looking to do a helicopter tour is probably not going to get cheaper over time. Now, have fuel costs gone down? Somewhat, but you can't really count on that forever. And even if they go down, something like labor is probably not going to get cheaper in the long term. And so aside from those smaller factors, just keep in mind that labor is probably going to get more expensive in our lifetimes, and that if you're looking to go somewhere and do something, it's probably not going to be cheaper than it is, today. So consider inflation. Keep inflation in mind when you are considering travel plans. So when you're younger, you may have more friends and family that are willing to kind of look after things when you're gone, whether it be a car, whether it be a cat, whether it be just collecting your mail. You may have an easier time as a young person finding other people that are willing to help you out in your journey. Back home, of course. That sounds a bit, but yeah, keep in mind that when you are younger, you may have more relationships that you can ask for help to handle different things while you are abroad. So that can come in really, a big help when you are halfway around the world and you're wanting to stay on top of different responsibilities and these types of things back in your home country and your home city. Finally, this is kind of the final point, and maybe even the most important point when it comes to traveling as a young person, why I think that there are advantages to traveling as a young person. You're probably going to have less responsibility than older travelers. You're probably going to have, you're probably less likely to have children. You're probably less likely to own a home that needs to have all this maintenance done to it, and the yard mowed, plumbing, electricity. You're probably not going to have an expensive vehicle that may need more careful and selective maintenance. You're probably not going to have as many bills that need to be paid. You're probably going to be consuming less than some older people do. There's going to be, if you don't have children, you're not considering paying for feeding them. You're not considering transporting them to and from wherever. Young people can sometimes be stereotyped as being self-centered, but I think part of that comes from just the fact that younger people tend to have less responsibility than older people. So yeah, keep in mind that as a young person, you probably have as little responsibility as you'll ever have in your life, and it may be a great time to consider some of the travel ideas that you want to execute on, because as you get older, as you get more responsibilities, more people relying on you, you may become more entrenched in various communities, various clubs, volunteer efforts, your job. These types of things can really be forces of resistance and kind of place a sort of a drag on your plan. So while I understand there's some disadvantages to traveling when you're young, I'm going to be making a video about that. I don't think it's all bad. I don't think it's as bad to travel when you're young as some people make it out to be. Some people would say, oh, young people don't need to travel, they need to just work and make money. And certainly there's some truth to that. I mean, traveling is not free. You have to make money. But to constantly put it off and to constantly think, well, I'll do it next year, or I'll do it in 5 years, or I'll do it in 10 years, you're not guaranteed that. I mean, I can name at least a half dozen people that I went to high school with and to college with, kind of from my home city, that have all passed away due to various reasons. I mean, you cannot count on living forever. You cannot count on living even many decades. You can't count on even being in good physical condition when you're older. I mean, there are people in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s that get cancer, and they have issues related to heart disease. I mean, my grandfather had his first heart attack at, I think he was 39. So it's unrealistic to constantly be a downer on traveling when you're young. Keep in mind that when you're young, you're going to have more energy than ever. You're going to be willing to put up with and tolerate certain things more than you will when you're older. You're going to have an easier time learning new languages and making friends. And I think that there's a lot of value in traveling when you're young. So I hope you enjoy this video. My name is Alex Conley. If you enjoy this video, you want to see more, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you have anything to add, if you can think of any other advantages to traveling when you're young, let us know, and I will see you next time.